Okay, a few of us here. Now, as I'd mentioned, I want to take some time and cover the first exam, so we're in pretty good shape as far as what's coming up. Now, if you'll go over into the modules area and go down to week number 4, and of course that's for next week. And exam 1 is due on the 1st of March at 5 p.m. And if you click on the link here, you're going to see it's 2 hours, 40 items. You have 3 attempts, and it takes the highest recorded, highest score recorded. Okay, so you've got multiple attempts with it, and you have 2 hours. And it's due on the 1st at 5 p.m. and then from 9 to midnight, you can see the correct answers. So that's what's going on with it. Now, the next thing, you also have an exam 1, part 2, and I want to spend a little bit of time. This is the hands-on part of the exam. And you'll notice here, I start off this first, we use the file for Badger Jams, okay? And that's that case where that's the case where we did the break-even analysis, okay? And let's and let's go in there for a moment. Now, I have the resources. I have the resources filed there, and let's just go into the files section, and we'll find it there. And it should be Badger Jams key. There it is. And you should see it in the files section of Canvas. It's called Badger Jams Key SP16. You see it? Find it in the files section. Now, let's go ahead and download it, and we'll talk about what I'm asking you to do for part 4. So I've got it already downloaded, but you go ahead and download it to your desktop. And I'm going to open it up here. And as you recall, okay, the file, okay, yeah, we need to open it. As you recall, we did the break-even analysis. This is that person who is the entrepreneur that wanted to sell jam. Does it sound familiar? And we worked through the total cost equation, where total cost equals fixed costs plus variable costs, and we walked through some of the assumptions. And remember, we had the sale price for a case of the jam. This is an old case I've had, but I think it illustrates this so well. And then we had the fixed costs. Here we talked about those, and those fixed costs are got to be paid. And then we had the variable costs. Those are costs that change according to the level of business activity. And then we had the contribution margin, which is the sale price minus the variable costs. Contribution margin is important for us to understand because it tells us, how much are we generating per unit to pay the cost that we must pay. Now, as we spoke about before, we can have a situation in which I open up a business and I don't sell anything. At that point, I've absorbed all of those sunk costs. And we went through some scenarios there for that company, as you recall, where we went 0 sales, half a break even. And you remember we looked at, given that what we had in terms of the sale price, the total fixed costs, and the total variable costs per unit, we had a break-even units, B16, okay, and here's I got lazy and didn't use the name manager like I should have, and that is the contribution margin, okay, pardon me, the total fixed cost divided by the contribution margin. So to break even, we had to sell 1,147 units, okay? So for exam 1, part 2, I'm going to ask you to simply come in and change some of the numbers up here in the assumption area. Okay? And then I'm going to ask you to use goal seek to come up with a sale price that gets you back to 1,147 units. Got me? Because as these like rent, if you go back there you'll want to download that part, the instructions, because I'll tell you specifically, the commercial stove, the change of the percentage change in it. Each of those, I want you to change them based on that percentage change I ask you to, and that will give you the new outlook in terms of break-even units. And so then you'll have to go back and compute the price per unit that gets you to 1,147 units. That's all I'm asking you to do, is to work that assumption area. Does that make sense? Should be pretty easy, but again, just to reinforce why we use the assumptions area, what we can do with it, and all that business. So that's exam 1, part 2. Okay? As far as the objective part of the exam down here, and at the end of each module, I'll have resources for quizzes and exams. So I have really 2 things for you. First of all, I have a sample exam 1, part 1. Okay? And this is one I used a long time ago, but it's a sample, and it will give you a feeling of the kinds of questions you might encounter. Then I also have, of course, at the end, as I've mentioned, at the end of each module, I'm going to have a file that tells you the resources for exams and quizzes. And you'll see that. Does everybody see that? Yes. Let me stop and see. Anybody have any questions? Because I got some of us here, some of us not here. A few folks out there and out in the ether land. Some people here in Bison land. Anybody have a question I could try to help you with? Yes? No? Okay. Now, I wasn't sure. I feel like exam 1's I wasn't sure how much prep or how much discussion I would need to go through with you there, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory. You should do pretty well on it. On the objective part, remember now you have a time limit, but you've got 3 attempts. Be strategic in how you use your time. And I'll say no more. All righty. Now, as I've said before, we're going to try to work a little bit ahead. So last week we worked on 4 and on 5, and 4 was where we did 4. We worked on that case, and then in 5 we did one of these was the budget pro forma with the city of Clintwood, and we did some of that. Now we're going to move on down to week 5, and I know we're working a little bit ahead, but here we're going to see another important concept of business. Okay, this course is called business problem analysis for a reason. We try to expose you to the most typical, the most prevalent types of problems that a company will run into or experience. Now, it's important to understand that there's a difference between a problem and a symptom. And when we work with economic order quantity, and that's where we're dealing with inventory, a symptom of not handling inventory well is you're always running out. If you run out of inventory, you can't sell it. And we know from marketing studies that if someone tries to buy your product and you don't have it available, they're going to tell at least a dozen or 2 people that you didn't have the product, which means you really will get killed on any kinds of orders. So you never want to be out of product. You just don't want to. By the same token, you don't want to have too much on hand. As I said in the earlier section, if you drive into, I don't care, Burger King, McDonald's, any fast food place, and you look at the space in that little cubicle, okay, there's a tiny amount of space for food preparation. There's an even tinier amount of space for food storage, and then the rest of it is for customers because you're running people in and out. And so they have to have a very sophisticated supply chain in order to get stuff to their stores on time. And their stores don't all sell the same thing at the same volume. So this is why I've said before, logistics and inventory are not really exciting until you can't get it or it doesn't come on time. Or you've ordered something, the box arrives, you open it up, and there's no instructions. Or there's a component missing. Or any one of a number of things that can go bump in the night, much less the stuff get there. And you can imagine the challenge that people had this week when they had that terrific snowstorm up north. Amazon, the people at Amazon, their inventory supply chain people are probably working 18 to 20 hours. I bet at least 18-hour shifts because they don't go home till things are fixed or things are doing. And so they had to prepare for that. And they had to ship things earlier than maybe they wanted or delay. And they had to try to figure out where can we run our trucks and where can we not, etc. What will move in this stuff. And if you're somebody like FedEx and you have all these flights grounded, you're grounded too. You're not flying. Okay? So it's a field that's very challenging. And I've always said to students, this is something you might want to look at as a career, because if they find out you're not afraid of numbers and that you have a service orientation, you could have some great opportunities. And I'll just tell you the story of one of my students. We used to go out to, when I taught the production course, we'd go out to Eaton Brakes, which is located here in Shawnee. They're a subsidiary of a large firm, and they made brake pads out here. And I guess in that course, they were management majors, all of them, because that's just management majors. They just take the course. I don't think marketing folks do. We had about 20 of us, and we went through, and they showed us their factory. And it was not what you would imagine. They were using a lot of controlled data, computer-controlled equipment, CAD and CAM. They had some of what you would expect, some of the noise and parts moving around that. And the lady who was our host was also the HR director, and she said, please, if any of you think you might be interested in this, please contact me or come back now, come over to my office, and I'll get you the application forms. Now, I had about 20 students, and I knew that of those 20 students, if 3 of them had a job waiting on them, they were lucky. But no one but one that, the one lost sheep went back to see her. And so he got a practicum with her and then an internship working for them. And then they hired him. And he called me one day and came over and said, let's go to lunch. I said, okay. So I'm visiting with him. And he said, I have a dilemma. I said, what's your dilemma? He said, well, the folks at Eaton are going to pay me X amount of dollars and pay my way through. I'll use MBA and logistics, but I have this company up in Kansas City that wants me to, and they're willing to pay me X amount of dollars and pay my way through a program at, I think it was at KU or K-State. And I thought, what a terrible dilemma to have. Okay. And he just started out doing inventory traffic. That's all he's meaning. He was tracking stuff as it was being shipped, and most of the components for that brake pad are made in China. So he was dealing with international, and he ended up getting to go over to China several times. He stayed with Eaton for a while, and then he went to work for a firm that his dad was at. But he got to travel to Asia several times. He went to Europe. Before he graduated, he did his, I'll tell you about his internship. They paid for his internship and he went to Vietnam. He was really interested. He went to this place in Saigon that they make, I don't know, it was some kind of component. And he not only did an internship, they paid him. They begged him to stay and go work for him. So there's some opportunities out there. So you may want to take a look at that. So this stuff it's exceptionally important, and there are great opportunities. Global economy, it's like I told everybody in the earlier section, I don't care how much you learn from Dr. Green or Dr. Hogan on how to market. I don't care how much you sell. If you can't get it to the customer, you haven't made the sale. It's got to get there. And so there are some great opportunities out there for you. So this is always one of my favorite parts of this course, because it lets us see this issue of trying to balance off inventory that I have and the inventory that I need to meet my customers or to take care of my customers. So if you'll come down over to week 5, and you'll see this first file. It's called Hardware Nuts Cool. Do you see it? And this is an example for XLS7, which means after we've gone through this today, if you wish, you may upload it for XLS7. Now, that being said, if you come down, you're going to see a key EOQ Harman XLS7 and then a key EOB Harman. You'll want to look at that. And you could also, if you care to, look at and upload either one of them. Those are from the textbook dealing with economic order quantities. So it's up to you, okay? Make sense? So you've got 3 of them there. And in the resources, you'll see that what those files and what they're all about. Let's look at Hardware Nuts, and I've got it there, and open it up and take a look, okay? Now let's start with it. Is this designed and put together well? Let's talk about that. You'll see at the top left-hand corner, I've got what the application is supposed to do, and then I have documentation there. I mentioned the thing called macros. Macros are recorded keystrokes. We'll do one case where we'll work with macros. And you have to make sure you let somebody know about them, because if you don't, they might create a problem for you. Let me see. Someone's got a question. No, I didn't. Is anybody here whistling? I can fix that real quick. Let me go here for a sec. Got everybody muted. Do you still hear the whistling? And is it a tune we all know? Okay, all right. I thought this is like one of those movies where, like there's people in there at night and then you hear a creaking door and all that, and, scary stuff happens. My wife likes to watch those. And just as the people are about to get like slaughtered and stuff, she'll run out of the living room and go hide her eyes, and she'll tell me when it's over. And then she comes back. I told her, I said, this is not the way to watch slasher movies if you're going to do this. Watch the whole thing. But she said, I'll have nightmares. So I said, okay. I don't tell her I hide my eyes too. Anyway, I don't know why people our age are watching something like that. It's probably demonically inspired. But let's take a look now. We're moving on over here, and we've got this assumptions, and this one is where we use the economic order quantity, and you're going to see that we have a fixed cost of inventory, a fixed cost of ordering, okay? 99.9% of the time, if I place an order, it doesn't matter if I order 1 or I order 1,000,000, the cost to place the order is the same. So what we've seen in dealing with inventory is that it mimics this total cost equation. In fact, the total cost equation is a foundation for it. So we have a fixed cost of ordering. If I order 1 or a million, it costs me the same amount to do the order. If I order 5, I put in a 5. If I order 5,000, I add 3 zeros. So that's a fixed cost of ordering. Then we have inventory carrying cost as a percentage of inventory value. If I have inventory on the floor, okay, I've got to keep it safe. It costs me money to do that. It costs me money if I have to keep it in terms of a climate control. It costs me money if I have to maintain it or something like that. And it also costs me money if it's sitting on space in my warehouse. If I'm paying money to rent a warehouse or I own it or storage facility, it costs me money. Now, as I'd mentioned, as I'd mentioned earlier, I talked about the fast food people, those types of retailers. They warehouse their food on trucks and on rail cars because it's always in moving somewhere. And that is because they don't have the room. They have distribution points, but they don't really have the room to store inventory. They can't put a week's worth of stuff in the back end of the store. They might be able to handle a day, maybe 2 days. So they're constantly in movement of ordering stuff and bringing it in so they don't run out of food. Well, you've got this kind of thing that mimics the variable cost, and that's the cost of carrying the inventory. So that is a percentage of the inventory value. So make sense so far? Okay, that gives us the total cost of inventory. Now, there's another thing over here in this light blue, and I'm going to try to get those bolded up some more. And maybe I think I'll bring them up a little bit so we can see them a little better. This is lead time. Anybody give me an idea of what you think I mean by lead time? Anybody?
How many times you go through your inventory or how?
The second one's you're on target. How long will it take me to get the stuff? Okay. What is today's the 21st, right? So if my vendor says I can have it to you by the 28th, okay, and I have a customer who says I'll pick it up on the 30th, I'm good. But if the vendor says I can get it to you on the 28th, and the 30th rolls around and it's still not there, it's a bad day for me and my vendor because I've lost the sale. And I probably have to do something for the customer, like reduce the price. So lead time is very, very critical. And I always want to make sure that I know the lead time so that I don't overpromise to my customer and when I can get it to them. Does that make sense? Now let me ask you, as you look down at that column, and let's take a look at the day's lead time, and this is column H. Tell me something about those numbers as far as their relative size and the risk that might be reflected there. Which ones are riskier? Which lead times do you think are riskier? Yes, you're exactly right, because the longer the lead time, the greater the chances that something will go wrong. That's the deal. It's the greater the chances of something will go wrong. And so you want to be careful about those. You want to watch them. Those long lead times usually should mean that they've got to put it together, manufacture, or something like that. Today, if you are a large enough, say a distributor, let's say you distribute, maybe you distribute and install glass. Folks that have glass factories are probably going to have a you're going to probably share a website with them where everybody has a store, okay, like a store, and they come in and they know how much you've got of this product how much you've got of that, and how long it will take you to make it, and all that business. So lead time is an important piece of all of this. So the longer the lead time, typically, the greater the risk, and you want to make sure you understand this. Now let's look at this first product up here, okay? And you can see I've got the lead time over there and how to calculate it, and you do that using GoalSeek, playing around with the lead time. And here we've got this product number, then we have the package description, and how many we have on hand, how many we've ordered, the unit cost, we have the annual usage. Now each of these variables or these numbers are going to be plugged into the economic order quantity, that is how much we need to order. Then we have an order point. That's where we've got to order stuff. Now, most of you will go to work for somebody who will have a pretty sophisticated, if not a highly sophisticated inventory system. And it will have figured out things like, okay, it's being shipped from Foxconn to LAX. It's an LAX, and it gets loaded on it's a cargo container, basically a railroad car without wheels. And we're going to take that car, and we're going to take a bunch of them, a mile or two of them, and run them into the Midwest. Then we're going to break them down and put them into semi-trailers, and then the semi-trailers from their distribution points will break them down to vans or whatever. You can see as we keep going from larger down to smaller units as we distribute it out through a network, like iPhone stores or whoever, phone companies are selling the things. So you're going to have the advantage of that. Now, this is just kind of the bare bones EOQ. So it conveys what you need to. But fortunately for you, you'll be working with systems that are pretty sophisticated and very accurate, that can take into account all kinds of time, all kinds of things, and that are robust enough to say, okay, let me put it like this. Folks like Walmart, people like Amazon, FedEx, all of the large carriers, they all employ software that lets them do regular operations, but that they can take offline and simulate disasters, simulate problems, simulate a hurricane in the southeast. I have probably shared this with you before, but when we went through the tornado in 2013 over there in Moore, and when we were the triage point for everybody in the city, the folks from Walmart called and said, here's what you're going to need day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, because they'd been through it enough times. And so we were down there. The first people that showed up was the disaster team from the Baptist General Convention. And then the second people that showed up was FEMA. And then here came Walmart. And so the bottom of our church was just like people who were in shock. We had folks that would greet them, and they've just lost their home. And they're kind of like, yeah, and you're going to need this. And we had baskets. It was incredible how that all worked. And it was just, it really like, I was going, this is absolutely amazing. And they had it nailed because they'd been through those so many times. Tornadoes, hurricanes, have been through those natural disasters. And, they had trucks rolling the minute that the thing was on the TV, and they knew where to go. I think the one thing I handled a lot, I helped handle the inbound freight for, I guess, I'm not sure how long, how many weeks. It all kind of blended into one sleepless day. But I remember I was there, it was about 5:15 or so, and this guy calls, and you could hear he was on the road, and he says, I'm coming in. And I said, well, we're going to close up the reception, the inbound at 5:30. He said, you're going to have to take me. He said, I'm coming from Baltimore. And I said, what? He said, I'm coming from Baltimore, Maryland. I got a truckload of water, and I'm going to deliver it because we've been gathering up water for you people for 2 weeks. I was not going to say, no, we brought him on in. No, we had all the water we needed. But these are people, the generosity of people is just unbelievable. I mean, it was just off the charts. We had one person. This is remarkable. We had this gentleman, he called, and I'm not going to tell you where he's from. He called and he said, I know that people there are in great suffering. And he said, I want to do something nice for 15 or 20 people. And so we got him on a conference call, and I said, what is it that you want to do nice? And he said, I'd like to take 15 or 20 of them on a paid vacation to Disney World. I'm going, what? Yeah, I'll pick them up, we'll fly them. And I thought, so the generosity of people are it's unbelievable, just unbelievable. And these kinds of skill sets, or if you're in business and you do this, this is what theologians would call common grace. And that is, I exhibit the grace of God in my common dealings with people. One of the most wonderful things, I got to do a little bit of it, was to try to hook up. Somebody called and go, my sister Beulah, she was on 15th Street. I don't know what happened. Yeah, and Beulah had got the word, and she was in Midwest City partying with the cousins, and that was a joyful thing. Then we had to make some calls. We couldn't make them. Someone had to call and say, we're sorry. We can't find them, or we're sorry. We're still going through the remains of their home, and we're looking. We're not in recovery mode anymore. So this is a way for us to exhibit common grace, and that is to show people that God loves everybody. He loves everybody, and that's the thing. That's the concept of common grace, and we should never forget that. It's how we act that out, and when we show that common grace, those are the opportunities when we get a chance to let the Holy Spirit do His work with people and bring them to a point where they experience saving grace. So, serving a meal well, popping people's popcorn at the movies, or anything you do that is good and helps people, or they enjoy their lives, or working down here at Costco or something like that. That's a noble occupation, okay? A noble thing to do. And I want to give you a piece of advice. You're all very intelligent people, or you wouldn't be here. And you're all going to end up getting your degree. Some of you will go on, and some of you will make the fatal mistake I did and go on and go into teaching. But I want to tell you something. I'll tell you a quick story. This is how smart I really am. At about 11 o'clock one night, my plumbing went out. And so I opened up all my business books, and I couldn't find anything about how to fix the plumbing. So what did I do? I called a plumber. And $250 later, I'm going, thank God somebody wanted to be a plumber. Otherwise, I had a mess in my hands. And I was glad to pay him $250. If I had to go get a book, my wife said, why don't you go over to, tomorrow and get a book on how to fix this? And I said, because it will be till Christmas next year getting it fixed. I don't have the time or the skills. And he came and he says, this, and he's out. So those folks over in some of those trades and so forth, they're very noble people. They go out all hours of the day, all kinds of weather, fix your HVAC, fix your plumbing, people that work on vehicles. I think some of the most courageous people in the world, people that go out here and somebody's car's broke down and they're in the middle of I-40, people going by 90 miles an hour and they're trying to get a car picked up. I wouldn't want to do that for a living. That'd be scary to me because people yell. Most people will pull over, but there's always that 10% who say, I think I'll just go even faster as this guy in a wrecker or gal's trying to pull the truck up. So there's a lot of nobility. And unfortunately in our country, we've lost a healthy respect for people that are tradespeople and work with their hands and do those kinds of things. I've got a guy that does painting for us, and he is an artist. He's a magician. And I've owned homes since I was 19. And I can tell you, it's probably half the time I'd get into a project and I'd realize it's time to call the pros. So these kinds of things are exciting things, and you can really do some good for people. Well, if we look at this, we come on over and we'll see the days in the LQ, and here's the square root of 2 times the fixed cost of the order times F11, and we'll find F11, and that's going to be the annual usage. And that's divided by the inventory carrying cost as a percent of inventory value times E11, okay, which is the unit cost. So you can see if you look at the structure of that thing. Now, here's what I would suggest is you take that, copy the formula, and put it over in a Word document or put it in a notepad as you put it together. But it's the simplest form of the EOQ. All right. And notice how we're balancing off 2 things. We're balancing off fixed cost of ordering, okay, and with we're really getting the ratio of them, and the inventory carrying cost, i.e. the variable costs, and that's on the unit cost. Notice we use the square root function, and the square root does what? It takes that down to a more pure level. So we wash the data a little bit using a ratio there by dividing them, and then we use that square root function to clean them up even more. And that's how we get the economic order quantity. Then we have the balance available, and then you'll see there in the reorder question, and notice, okay, and again, I was lazy. I should have done the name manager and all that stuff, and I didn't. If J11 and J11 is the balance available is less than or equal to G11, and that's the order point, then the output is yes. Otherwise, I leave it blank. See the conditional statement there? And then I use some conditional formatting to highlight it so that if I need to order, it indicates it with the red fill and then the red font, the dark red font. So if I have 1,000 of these, it'll pick me up automatically. So make sense? This is the simplest form of it. There are some other more extensive equations for it that can take into account things like seasonality, which is a big issue. But this is just the basic form. But the key idea is I'm balancing. Okay, I'm balancing that cost of having the stuff on the floor or carrying cost having it around versus the cost, okay, of what? Ordering. And I want to make sure that I order enough. There's one industry that does some very unique uses of this. In every state of the union, there's a thing called the excise tax. And the excise tax is an inventory tax that's charged on goods that you have in your premises. And companies that distribute spirits and beer have excise taxes placed on them. So one of their common things to do is when they know when the tax season's coming, they take inventory and they put it in rail cars and in storage units, rail cars, and then in semis, and they have them on the border, and they'll use the OQ to have just enough to carry them through, so they minimize the amount of tax they pay. And then when the tax person's come and gone, and they've got their excise tax, then the stuff starts to flood into the warehouse. And here in the state of Oklahoma, they do it. If you drive by, if you ever go by 40 over there by what used to be known as Crossroads Mall, 240 and 35, excuse me, you'll see. I think they're the largest beverage distributor. Is that Budweiser place over there? It's either them or it's the Dr. Pepper people or Coke people over by the fairgrounds off of May. But one of the two of them is the largest distributor. But they will do that, and so the people are doing the excise tax. They'll walk around and go, "Boy, your warehouse is empty." And everybody says, "Yeah, it's pretty empty this year." So then they don't have to pay that much excise tax because the excise tax gets passed on to the retailer, which gets passed on to the consumer. Common thing, but the folks in that industry are the most notorious. I had a good friend of mine whose family was in that distribution business, and it was interesting to see. And I remember when I lived in St. Louis, I went through a brewery. I went through a tour of the Anheuser-Busch brewery, and that's quite an operation. Incredible operation. I thought what was really, I would not want to do is inside, I'll just tell you real quickly, in the brewery, they have these gigantic tanks, and they'll move the product along like they're on a conveyor belt. And those tanks have a special coating, and they have to be as smooth a surface as they can possibly be, because if they're not, there's friction, and because they move so much liquid through there, it really can cost them quite a bit of money to move it through if they don't reduce the friction. So they have people who will get in after they've run stuff through and will polish those. Oh, man, and they climb down this gigantic vat, and you're thinking, I'd be scared, because I'd be in there and here comes some Michelob, and I'm swimming in Michelob. And that fantasy I had was not what I thought it would be. I'm drowning now. So that would have to be harrowing work. It's an amazing thing to see those bottle as they bottle the stuff. Oh, it's just absolutely amazing. Well, all that being said, this is XLS7. Now I have a couple of those there that are going to let you look. You can use from the textbook, and I'm going to close that down for a moment, and let's go in, and I'm going to find, I've got the file there on the resources. Now, if you come down to XLS7, the resource file, there's this one, and then there's the EOQ XLS file, and the Contra, looks like the Contra TOQ, Contra T EOQ files, and those are from Chapter 81. Chapter 81 is going to be in those Excel files, those zip files in the content number 2. Okay, but just real quickly, I'll pop up over to the text, and you could play with those if you care to. This is Chapter 81 out of the text, and they talk about the inventory EOQ model. Okay, and they'll walk you through that there in the text. So it starts on page 81, where they talk about the EOQ and a template for it, and they show you the formula. Okay. And then they have the EOB, and they introduce you to that concept. And you could see that as well. And then, so you'll want to download, if you want to, you can download either of those files, or if you want to play with them, or I have them there for you, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I did. Let's take a look at this for just a sec. And so if you want to see a step-by-step process to put that template together, then you can do that. And you can see similar, have a variation on that theme of a cost of annual holding cost per unit, the cost per order, annual demand, the EOQ, the holding cost per year, order costs, annual orders. So you could use GoalSeek if you care to, or you could use the scenario manager to play around with those to see what some possible outcomes would be, or what things will look like if conditions should change. And also have one there for the ELB. So if you want to see something supported by the text, that's over there in Chapter 81. And then I have the files for you here. Got that? So you've got any one of those 3 files you can upload for the workshop credit. I think the value of the textbook is they'll expose you to the EOB, and they'll show you some of they're in the text, for example. What I do like is that they will show you the formulas, okay, and give you a little bit more narrative to hang your hat on. But this is a situation where we're trying to balance these off. Does this make sense? Okay. We'll go back over to the module here for a sec. And we know about exam 1 that'll be coming up. Exam 1 exam 1 part 1, exam part 2. You've got a sample. We've gone through all of that business. And I don't have any resources here for you. I mean, like practical examples or stuff out on the web that you can go see. There's plenty out there if you should be interested, or just to explore it a little bit and to see the kinds of products, commercial products that are out there available for people to use. 95% of them are so very intuitive, you're not going to have trouble mastering them at all. And it's, do any of you remember Miss Turnage, who was here to talk computer science? Anybody? Or okay, she must have left before all of you. Miss Turnage taught computer science for us, and she worked for Walmart, and she was over at Bentonville in their World IT headquarters. And I was really sad to see her go, because few people do inventory as well as Walmart. I think it's obvious when you walk around and you see all those goods. And one of the things that was interesting, I would get her to tell me some more stories so I could kind of get some insights. And I was scheduled to go there and go through a tour, and I couldn't make it. But one of the things they do there is, if there's a problem anywhere, nobody goes home till the problem is fixed. That's a novel thing. Now, they are paying you a lot of money. And what they'll do is they'll hire people in, as she shared with me. And then the longer you stay, the more you advance in terms of salary. And their thing is, if we have a problem, we all stay till it's fixed. So there's not a kind of thing where we all go home at 5 o'clock. It's a 24-hour day, 7-day a week, 365-day a year operation. But when you think about it, yes, there's some things that Walmart has I think probably for the founder of that company, some unintended consequences. But on the whole, they're pretty good. They're a pretty good company, and they do some remarkable things. And if you go in today and you can't find your cherry raspberry lip balm and your week's ruined, thank Walmart. It never ceases to just do yourself a favor as you start to become a business professional. If you were art students, I'd say, look, every time you get a chance to go to a museum, go look at some art, okay? Different types of art, different settings. And I'd say the same thing with you as business students. When you walk into a place, start to ask yourself, what's their value proposition? Why do they get paid? Who pays them? What is it that they do here? What are the materials that they use? And if they're a retailer, how do they store their inventory? How do they handle it, etc.? And start to think about what you're seeing, so that as you go through school, you develop a much more refined palette. And I can guarantee you, the first time you walk into Walmart, let me ask you this. Let's say you've got the world's greatest search engine in front of you. Open up a new tab and go tell me, how many products does an average Walmart store carry? I'd be curious to know. Have an idea? Google tell us anything yet? 100. The big one is 142 1,000 products. That's a lot of stuff to take care of, isn't it? That's amazing, isn't it? Absolutely amazing. I've told you this story before, but I love to tell you because it tells you so many things. Our country is not perfect, but there are some things about that are right. I had a man who had this was a long time ago early in my career, and the wall in Berlin had just fallen, and this is a man who was a Polish. He was the rector of the Polish Business Academy, and he flew into Chicago, and we took him out to see, and we walked into a Walmart, and his jaw dropped. He said, "This is like heaven. How do you get all of this?" And we walked over to the deli, and there was, and there's everything and he said, and at home we wait for hours to get a loaf of bread. This will tell you something about communism, about the socialist, the Soviet Union. Here's Poland that has some of the richest coal veins in the world, high quality coal. And here's what they did. The Russians came in, and when they have more tanks than you do, you typically will follow orders. And they would have the Poles mine their own coal, send it back to Russia, and Russia would charge them for their own coal. So if you think the man in Moscow is our friend, you better think twice. He worked for them. He was one of their agents. Amazed me. I went over the first summer after the wall fell, and we went to the Polish Business Academy, and we had 300 Soviet officers who were headed back to Russia, and we were supposed to teach them all about the market economy and all this stuff. And it was amazing. And their English was perfect. They spoke perfect Oxford English, and their mathematical skills were off the charts. But they didn't understand about market, demand. They didn't understand about salaries. Well, the government sent them money, but they didn't understand you earn a salary. They didn't understand you apply for it. They didn't understand any of that. The government had taken care of them because they were the military. But they were very curious about our churches. They said, you have churches everywhere. They were so curious that at night after the class, we'd have another big session, and we'd answer their questions about churches and religion in the United States. It was me and my friend who is a Presbyterian and another friend of mine who is a Hasidic Jew. Is that a combination? A Southern Baptist, a Presbyterian, and a Hasidic Jew. Now, that made for some interesting discussions. And they wanted to know everything. Now, at that time, I was in a point in my life where I was having to have an intellectual conversion. Okay? I was having some questions and doubts. And one day it occurred to me, as I'd have to go scurry back to my room every night and open my Bible and read it and study it. And the internet wasn't really anything at that point. So a lot of stuff I had to think, I can't find a commentary or anything. And a lot of questions I in detail couldn't answer. But I read, and I realized that those people, I was not sent to them. They were sent to me. That was an interesting revelation. I met a gentleman who was kind of the ringleader of the whole thing. And he had traveled to England and Australia. And when he was in England, he was in a hotel, and apparently they missed a Gideon's Bible. And he picked up a Gideon's Bible and he read it, and he had a conversion experience, and he smuggled that back into Russia, Soviet Union. Can you imagine that? If they found that Bible on him, guess what would happen? They would liquidate him and his family. And he told me about that experience. I thought, wow. And it was just amazing to me. They were so curious. They were curious about spiritual things, not so much about what we did. But we'd be having class. We'd go from 6 a.m. till 7 o'clock at night. And this is for a whole summer. And they were afraid if we didn't get them Americanized or capital or become capitalists, everybody's afraid they go back and destabilize the country. So when I talk with my friend Alex every now and then, I laugh and I said, we've probably one of these Russian oligarchs or that, that's probably somebody who's in our class, and we did the job too well. But it was interesting because we'd be in the middle of a class like this, and the lights would go out. And the rector would come into the room and he'd say, well, until the government gets enough hard currency, the lights will stay off. And then when we get enough hard currency, the Russians will let us have more coal and we can turn the lights on. Amazing, isn't it? I'll tell you what, when I got off the plane, when I came home, I got on my knees and I kissed the ground. I said, thank God I live here. Because I thought I wouldn't want to live under that. How lucky and fortunate we are. Well, I feel so good about that. I might take up an offering, but I won't. Well, my friends, I think we've covered what we need to cover today. You know what you got before you, and we went through 7, and we've talked about some about the exam. Are there any questions that anyone has? Yes.
Quick question just about accessing the Clayton file.
Uh-huh.
Can you show me how to access that real quick?
That one is the, yeah. Let me pull the resources key up, the resources file up here for just a second. And it's the one that's the city of Clintwood.
Yeah.
It's XLS5 WIP, and go into the files section, you'll find that. Okay. So go in there now and see if you can find it. That was the one we did where we did the assumptions on the town budget. And then if it also, so that should be in the files area.
Well, I think it was under. Oh, there you go.
Did you find it?
Yep.
Good. So you found it in the files? Yep. Yeah. Now, anytime I have something like a key, you can use those, take a look at them, because I've probably covered them or they're in the book covered. And that for the workshop, that's good enough for me. Again, I've got some folks that are okay working as I work through a case, and we've got a little bit more involvement, or who want to work through the book and see the step by step, okay, or who want to do both. As long as you upload a file, I'm good. If you upload 2, I'm fine. One final thing before I let you go. Everybody understands about submitting, because this can get crazy. When you go to submit your file, you look and there's a little green bar, right? It says submit. Click that and then scroll down and you'll see where you can actually upload the file. It caught me by surprise. They've done something with the window on that, and I kept going. I was having people email me. So I think we're good now on that. Yes? All right. Thank you so much, folks. Have a good weekend. Any other questions? Did that get you taken care of? Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I will see all of you on Tuesday.